When I arrived at the small roadside inn, the attendant handed me a key with a calm, distant smile. It was well after midnight, and the long drive through the snowy wild had worn me out. The building was plain and efficient, a simple place to rest before my next consulting assignment. As I turned to leave, the attendant paused and said quietly, "Your room is on floor 6. Note, there is no floor 7. I frowned for a moment before forcing a polite nod and wishing me a pleasant stay. In the lift, I noticed something odd. The control panel had buttons for floors 1 through 6 and then jumped directly to 8. I stared at the empty gap, my tired mind momentarily forgetting its exhaustion. It was as if the building pretended that the 7th level never existed, a warning I chose to ignore. My room was small and neat, clearly designed for busy travelers whose visits were brief. A large window overlooked an endless white landscape dotted with trees under a dark sky. Out of habit, I locked the door and set my travel bag on a simple chair. A heater murmured steadily, filling the quiet with a constant low noise. I intended to sleep immediately, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the missing level. I grabbed my phone and searched for information about the inn, yet found nothing unusual. Just another remote northern stop with no odd reviews or stories. I convinced myself it was nothing more than a quirky design choice. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., I awoke, not from any loud noise or nightmare, but from a feeling that I was being observed. I lay still while the heater hummed and the wind rattled outside, though no movement or sound followed. When I looked at the peephole, only complete darkness met my eyes. I used my phone's glow to shine a weak light toward the door, but the black spot remained unchanged. I told myself it was a minor glitch with the light, yet when I stepped closer, I saw that the darkness shifted slightly, as though something on the other side was moving. My stomach dropped and I clutched the key tightly. The dark patch slowly receded, leaving me unsure of what I had seen. I listened carefully for any noise, no footsteps, no creaks, only an unnerving silence. I waited a long time before I finally relocked the door. Later that morning, despite my weariness, I needed answers. Over a quiet breakfast, I spoke with a new attendant, a middle-aged man with tired eyes who had replaced the previous clerk. I mentioned offhand that the building skipped floor 7, asking, "I noticed there's no level 7 here." He merely shrugged and replied, "Some folks think 7 brings bad luck." After a brief pause, he added in a low tone, "Best not to ask too many questions." His response left me with a sense of unease. I wished I had let it go, yet that night at 3:12 a.m. I awoke once more. This time I sensed I was not alone, as if a presence pressed gently against the door. I sat up slowly in the dim room, the heater still humming and the wind still howling, but the peephole remained dark. Then I noticed the door handle twist slightly before easing back, and I heard a soft dragging sound from down the hall. That moment spurred me to look for clues elsewhere. I examined the fire escape plan posted near the stairs and saw every floor from 1 to 6 clearly marked, then a jump to floor 8, an empty space where floor 7 should be. I ran my fingers over the map and felt as if something had been intentionally removed. Next, I returned to the lift, waited until the hall was quiet, and pressed the buttons for floor 6 and 8 at the same time. The lift began to move, but the air turned noticeably colder, and soon the indicator for floor 8 went dark. For a long moment, nothing changed. Then a slow, deliberate knock sounded from beyond the closed doors, followed by a soft, scratchy whisper from the metal. "You do not belong here." In a burst of anxiety, I hit the button for the ground floor. The lift dropped quickly and the doors did not open in the lobby. Even after leaving by car, I never saw any sign of a seventh floor, though it felt as if it was watching me. As I drove away, I recalled seeing one window on a non-existent level with its curtains slightly drawn. I left the inn behind, yet the memory clung to me throughout the long drive south. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting someone to appear at the edge of the road. I tried to dismiss it as overactive caution, but deep inside I knew that something had observed me at that place and might still be present. By afternoon, I reached the next town, a bleak, windswept settlement that looked more like a cluster of struggling buildings than a proper community. I pulled into a gas station, filled my tank, and sat in my car, debating whether to continue or search for more clues. I searched online for the inn again, but only generic listings came up. No strange reviews, no local ghost stories, nothing to mention a missing floor, as if it were an ordinary building. Not satisfied, I turned to state property records to see if there was any documentation about its construction. To my surprise, I found an old blueprint showing that the inn was originally built with 7 floors. Then, in the early 1990s, a renovation permit was filed, and the plans were changed completely. Floor 7 was removed without any mention of demolition or new work. I sat in disbelief, realizing that the missing floor had been deliberately erased from the records. This discovery reminded me of that subtle warning from the dark peephole, the dragging sound, and the whispered message in the lift. I wished I had simply kept driving. Nonetheless, I headed to the only diner in town. The small eatery was nearly empty except for a lone man at the counter, whose coffee had long turned cold. He looked like someone who had spent many hours there, his hands rough and his eyes holding many untold stories. I took a seat a few stools away and ordered a cup of coffee. In a soft tone, I asked if he had ever been to the inn up north, keeping my voice calm and casual. He hesitated before replying, "I've been around long enough to hear many stories." I pressed gently, "You mean the one with no 7th floor?" His response was low. "No one talks about it unless they want trouble." I asked what had happened there, and after a long pause, he murmured, "Something returned." I tried to ask for more details, but he simply shook his head and quietly advised, "Don't look too deep into it." I left the diner with more questions than answers. That same night, I booked a room at a different inn far from the previous one, hoping to find some peace. But sleep did not come easily. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I awoke once again. I found the peephole in my room was entirely dark. I stared at it for several minutes, noticing a slight movement within the darkness, not outside my door, but within the peephole itself. When I reached for my phone, the black patch seemed to shrink, though no sound accompanied the change. There was no movement outside, no footsteps, no rustling, just a heavy silence. Then I heard a gentle tap coming from inside the room, not at the door. I turned and saw that the closet door, which I had left slightly open when I unpacked, now had wet marks and unfamiliar fingerprints on its inside. At dawn, I left the inn in haste, not even bothering to collect my bag, and drove off quickly. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something had followed me, even if I could not say what it was. I felt compelled to return to the inn and face the mystery of the missing floor. I went back not because it made sense, but because I needed to understand what had happened. Something had reached out in the night, leaving marks in places I had not seen before. Although I had spent years studying risks and dangers, nothing in my experience could explain this presence. I did not believe in ghosts, yet every clue pointed back to that strange place. The journey back felt longer than before, as if the road itself resisted my return. Snow fell in thick sheets, forcing me to drive slowly through the white haze. After what seemed like hours, the outline of the inn emerged against the barren landscape. I parked in the lot and stepped into the lobby where the lights were on. Though the air felt different, inside, the receptionist greeted me with a polite but distant smile as usual, and I handed over my bag while asking for a room. He quickly told me that rooms were available on several floors, and I chose the one on level 6. This time, he did not mention anything about a missing floor. I took the lift alone. The ride was very quiet. Only the soft hum of the machine and the faint noise of moving cables could be heard. When the doors opened, the hall looked normal. Plain carpeting, simple walls, and steady artificial air. Yet there was a weight in the air, as if the building itself were holding its breath. I returned to my room and noted that nothing had changed. The chair remained, the heater still hummed, and the peephole looked clear. But I was no longer there just to rest. I was determined to uncover the secret of floor 7. I checked the fire escape map once again and saw the blank space where the floor should be. Then I went back to the lift, pressed the buttons for level 6 and 8 together, and waited as the lift descended slowly, as though I were sinking through thick syrup. Midway down, the lights flickered, and the temperature dropped sharply. I gripped a small knife for a sense of control, even though I knew it would do little. The lift eventually stopped, and the doors did not open immediately. I pressed the panel repeatedly, but received no reply. Then came a measured tap on the doors, followed by a soft, low whisper. "You came back." The doors opened to reveal a hall that looked both familiar and strange. The walls were lined with more doors than one would expect on a single floor. Some of these doors were open, exposing dark, empty rooms that defied common layout. A continuous low hum seemed to come from beneath the floor, and each step on the thick carpet felt uncertain. I pulled out my flashlight and turned it on, yet the beam barely cut through the heavy darkness. At the far end of the hall, I noticed a slight movement, as if something was trying to imitate a person. My grip on the flashlight tightened as I called out, "Who is there?" There was silence until a gentle creak from one door broke it. I felt a soft pressure near an open door and stepped closer. Inside, in the center of an empty space, stood a large mirror. My reflection stared back, but the room behind it looked altered. The door was closed, and the walls seemed to leak dark streaks from hidden cracks. Then, unexpectedly, my reflection moved on its own, stepping forward and smiling in a way that was not my own. I recoiled as the door slammed shut, and the hall appeared to shift around me. Without warning, a door swung open at the far end, and something stepped out. More than just a shadow, something that had been waiting. Instinctively, I rushed back to the lift and pressed its call button repeatedly as the soft hum grew louder. The lift finally opened, and I scrambled inside. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of a face that was not my own, a mouth stretched too wide and split in an odd way. The lift then plunged suddenly, and the low hum stopped as abruptly as it had begun. When the doors opened again, I found myself on floor 6. I ran back to my room, quickly locked the door, and checked the peephole. It was dark once more. This time I sensed slow, steady breathing on the other side. I leaned back against the wall, keeping my breathing even, aware that my small items, a flashlight, a notepad, and my phone, could do little if the unknown entered. Then I heard a familiar low whisper from close by. "You do not belong here." I braced myself as the door handle turned slowly, the lock releasing with dragging sounds. I listened until I heard the soft chime of the lift in the hall, and then I quickly packed my bag, deciding I would not spend another night in that room, though I couldn't leave the inn until I learned more about floor 7. Stepping out into the hall, I noticed that the lift lights were dimmer and the air carried a strong scent of cold metal. I pressed the lift button again and once more selected floors 6 and 8 together. The lift began its descent immediately, the air growing colder and denser as if I were entering a sealed space. When the lift finally stopped, I stepped out onto what must be the missing level, floor 7. This time the continuous hum was louder, and I began recording with my phone while using my flashlight to peer into the dark hall filled with numerous doors. Some doors were wide open, revealing empty rooms that made little sense. In one, I saw a lone wooden chair. In another, the walls appeared to shift slowly, as though something pressed behind them. A low, steady hum came from the floor as I advanced slowly, each step echoing softly on the thick carpet. In one room, I found a small desk with a printed note listing dates and brief remarks about the inn's troubled past. The note mentioned that in 1992, management had sealed off floor 7 because of unexplained events, and later warnings advised that the matter was not contained. I carefully slipped the note into my bag when suddenly a soft tap came from behind me. I turned quickly, catching only a glimpse of an empty space near an open door as the air felt charged with tension. My hands grew cold as I moved through the dark hall, and the lights overhead flickered weakly. Then, without warning, the low hum ceased, and a soft, scratchy whisper murmured, "You should not have returned." I ran without glancing back, the hall stretching long as doors closed behind me, one after another. At the lift, I repeatedly pressed the button for the ground floor. Before the lift could carry me to safety, I saw a man at the reception desk who I had never seen before. A pale man in a worn suit with alert eyes. He looked at me for a brief moment, then at the advancing presence, and said quietly, "Leave now." Reaching under the counter, he tossed me a small key marked basement door. I caught it and instantly understood that the inn was shifting around me. Extra doors appeared and the hallway seemed longer than normal. In a sudden moment, I rounded a corner and nearly collided with a wall of mirrors. These mirrors did not reflect what I expected. They showed empty halls behind me, as if watching. Without hesitation, I grabbed a nearby chair and smashed one of the mirrors. As the glass shattered, the hall briefly returned to normal. I then raced to the door labeled basement door and stepped inside. The space beyond was not a room at all, but an endless pit that stretched downward into darkness. Within that void, I sensed a shifting presence, a shape that was neither human nor object, but something entirely different. It became clear that the inn was not haunted by stray spirits. It was a living structure that had absorbed guests and staff over many years. Standing at its center, I realized that the danger was not unbeatable. I looked at the printed note in my hand and understood its warning was still true. With no time to waste, I hurried to an old control panel near the pit and began flipping switches and turning knobs. The building shuddered, and a deep sound echoed from above. Finally, I pulled the last lever, causing the fire suppression system to fail. A hiss and a spark emerged, followed by sudden flames and rising steam from burst pipes. The entire room shook as if something deep inside was reacting. I ran as the fire quickly spread through the inn, consuming both the building and the mysterious force within. The hallways collapsed behind me, and the soft hum turned into a chaotic clamor. I made it to the lobby just as the front doors burst open, revealing a snowy landscape lit by the raging fire. I did not stop until I was far away, and by the time help arrived, the inn was nothing more than a charred skeleton. No survivors or bodies, only ashes remaining. I never learned the true name of the man at the desk. His identity was never recorded, and none of the staff recalled him. Yet I sensed that a part of him had been trapped in that place and had shown me a way out. Months have passed since then, and sometimes I wake at 3:12 a.m. and check for any sign of an unwelcome presence. The inn is gone, and whatever once dwelled there is not coming back. I made sure that it would never return.